Welcome to the Two Boots Word Vault podcast. This episode is part 2 of our tribute to the great writer Frederick Manfred. We gathered at the MCN6 television studio on January 20th, 2024 to praise and appreciate the work and life of this great American novelist and poet. This episode features the readings by Diane Jarvimpa and Danny Klecko.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, all of us are writers. We all have different voices. It's great to have so many voices, and at the same time, I'm thinking, you read all of Fred Manfred's work, and you're getting all these voices. I remember Fred said, for him, writing was like living a second life. Wonderful. Next up, we got Diane Jarvie. And now, Diane is a shy poet from a shy family in a shy land. Her latest book of poems is simply titled Shy Lands. But don't let her shy ways deceive you. Her soul is a force of nature. Her poetry can send a simple line through your heart the way a tornado can send a wheat stalk through a 2x4. Diane Jarvie.
I'm a lot shorter than everybody here. Hello. Thank you so much for including me today. I did know about Fred Manfred when I was living in Dinkytown and when I was in middle school and high school, and I was kind of part of the writing community because of my mother. So I thought I'd start with, I don't know if anyone's ever seen, he wrote a little, like a chapbook that was published by the Dinkytown Antiquarian Bookstore, or it was put out by that. I think it was Alan Kornblum put it together for Toothpaste Press. And it's his memories of the beginnings of writing and his journey as a novelist. So it started in 1937. He said, it was at 522 12th Avenue Southeast that I wrote the second and third drafts of my first novel. It was also at that address that I got my first box full of rejections. The rejections hurt, especially when I began to get long letters from editors telling me that while they enjoyed reading the manuscripts, they felt the books weren't quite right for their lists. It was while living at 522 that I did finally get an opinion that made up for all the rejections. I'd heard that Meridel de Suhr, the novelist and strong-minded left-winger, held a writing class in a bar in downtown Minneapolis. It turned out to be a joy to watch her run that class. She learned I had finished a finished manuscript at home and that I hadn't quite known what to do next, and she suggested I bring it around to her house. About 2 weeks later, I had a call from her, and could I meet her for lunch at the Stockholm Cafe on Washington Avenue. The Stockholm was where lumberjacks and railroad workers hung out. We both had a beer and a hamburger, and she had the manuscript of The Golden Bowl and placed it to one side of our booth. I kept wondering what in the world she really thought. I was afraid that she didn't like it, and that was why we didn't begin with it. But finally she picked up the manuscript and in her warm earth mother voice said, I read your book about the Dust Bowl. It is already better than John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. It does need more work, but let me give you some advice. Never take instruction on how to improve it from some other writer or from some self-appointed critic. You're one of those writers who should be allowed to work out your own style and your own way of treating your subject matter. Learn to be your own best critic. To write out of something deep within you. You write out of something deep within you, and only you will know when you're voicing that deep within you truly. And don't worry, you're a good one, and you're going to get better, provided you work at being your own best critic. Well, I nearly exploded. I tried not to let my feelings show, and thanked her quietly, and then we each went our own way. And from that point on, I knew I would eventually be published on my own terms. That happened in 1938, so just a year later, 1 year before Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath came out. So I think, I think that's so instructional for all of us writers. And that, of course, he talks in that same little book about all the people he met, all the writers at the University of Minnesota at that time. He was really fond of Robert Penn Warren and had some other not so friendly things to say about others, but it's so fun to read. It's a great little book. Someone mentioned also, Scott, From the Wind Blows Free, that reminiscence he wrote, and it's all, I love it that he wrote it in third person like that. And this is just Fred's lines from a poem in there about Yellowstone National Park. Weary one day of haying in the slough and slopping dumb hogs, I got out my thumb and became a vagabond. I hitched, I walked, I slept on open prairies, I begged, I took. I drove for an old maid. I hitched a ride with a madman. I held a girl on my lap. Oh, I traveled far and wide. So I wanted to mention Freya because she's an incredible writer herself. And if you've ever watched those interviews she's done with her father, they're just so moving and touching, and they're still available. You can find them online. And then she has her own book about her father. And here's what she says. My father had a way of being there as a positive, life-affirming force. It wasn't just that he helped me because he loved me. He got such joy out of his power to help. He loved knowing that I would be safe because he was safe and because I had let him lend a hand. The question of whether he always felt so positive about life didn't arise. He made up his mind to be a man who gave people a lift. And then she said in a little email to me, she said, he is still with me. A man who watched over his family during long, dark nights on the lookout for tornadoes, and who left breakfast every morning smiling, grateful to begin another day of writing. I felt protected from the storms and aware how lucky I was to be alive to explore my own dreams. So I know that Tim mentioned Writers in Judgment. I love that book too. So I thought, Manfred said, I thrill more to music than any piece of literature. He thought music was so powerful. And then when he was in the sanitarium, when he had tuberculosis, he had some time on his hands, and he found out that he had maybe some skill that he could become a painter. But then he kind of turned away from that and decided writing was definitely what he was supposed to be doing. I think that when I read some of Manfred's work, it's so painterly and so beautifully lyrical at times. So I thought I'd read a little bit from here, but now I don't know where it went. So sorry. Holy smokes. What? Okay, here we go. So this is Cain is the main protagonist, and he's on his horse Lonesome, and they're riding down to the Red Fork Canyon. Lonesome's hooves whispered across thick carpets of pine needles. The scent of rosin was sticky, cloying. It awakened memory of spilled molasses. Lupin bloomed purple in the open parks. A fallen old cottonwood growing in too high an altitude and dying early lay to the left. Brilliant red paintbrush grew near it. Aspen trembled. A black butterfly with yellow trim fluttered around cane for a ways. Petrified logs lay scattered to all sides. The sweet smell of morning rain rose from the ground. It made a man want to hug something. Silently, they rode down, down. They near foot slopes, so the valley rose toward them. The upthrust cliffs and peaks climbed behind them, rose into distant blue pinnacles frosted over with snow and cloud mist at the very top. There were touches of autumn on the high flanks, yellow and ochre and gold mixed in with the deep green of the pine. Swallows banked steeply over dark abysses, swift, fleeting mirages like cities seen between eye blinks, winked over the forests. They rode down into warmth and summer. It became easier to breathe. More and more the flittering leaves of aspen began to show. Buckbrush replaced juniper, and at last, as they rode into the head of Red Fork, sweet spring water welled out of the rocks on all sides, and the medicinal smell of sage came up on the wind. Bluebells, lupin, grew thick and tall. Wild primroses and white-purple clematis nodded on the low grassy benches. Most fragrant were the larkspur and lobelia. The orange berries of wild rose bushes tossed in the wind, and off in the side draws, the choke cherries hung a ripe deep red, and the wild plums a turning red, and the wild raspberries a maiden lip red, and the gooseberries an opal blue. And all the while, singing meadowlarks and scolding magpies threaded through the trees. So this is just my little poem here. If I were a runaway horse, I'd stop at that fever tree, set a course, and go, running over fluid hungers of the earth kitchen, deep prodigal ponds, overripe bear den, angry swamp. Past ancestors' graves, sacred bones, layers of the forgotten, fathoms of shadow. Around the underground springs, through wild, vast intellect heartroots of aspen, ironwood, ponderosa, soft give of clay, cool palm of shale. Past hierarchy of ants, blind nubs of ferns, across wombs of the vast plains, push past maneuver of mountain, obligation of storm soak, detonation of fault lines. Flow, flee, and change up, summoned by the exotic broth of wombs and praise that make this planet its odd assembly of humors and substance, that in turn make me wander and praise the ground, grieve, and listen to each leaf song as I move on in my lonesome legend, long-legged, pulled apart ways. Thank you.
Thanks for mentioning Freya there, Diane. Yesterday I stopped out and Freya sent a number of Fred's books over here. They're at the table. Scott's going to sell them. I highly recommend that you buy some Fred Manfred books. And I want to thank her for all the support that she gave us. Tom and Freya both said that they wish they could have come today. Back in 1990, before I wrote my poem on Desert Storm, Danny Klecko was a baker, and he provided a loaf of bread that Rudy Perpich and Mikhail Gorbachev shared, right? This is a quote from Klecko. If it weren't for that loaf of bread, you'd probably have missiles pointed at your house right now. Danny Klecko.
All right. So before I get started, thank you, everybody. But more important than Tributary and more important than Frederick Manfred, myself, any of you in here, is the book. It's the book. This is all about the goddamn book. And there's only one person in here selling them. His name is Scott from Eat My Words. So I bring you glad tidings from the capital city. I don't know how you do it over here in Babylon, but in capital city, you go to the event, you buy a book, all right? Buy the book. We'll be watching. January 1951. That was 73 years ago yesterday. Frederick Manfred buried Sinclair Lewis. Sinclair Lewis was gracious. During the 1920s, he put the proletariat and Midwestern writers in the forefront of America's lit scene. He launched Fitzgerald, Thomas Wolfe, and Frederick Manfred, issuing them worldwide praise, an act of generosity given for free. Frederick Manfred loved Sinclair Lewis. He stood in a graveyard in Sauk Center, winds howling, temps surpassed 20 below zero. He stood in a graveyard bestowed with the honor of delivering Sinclair Lewis's eulogy. Among Minnesota writers, no one compares to Lewis in terms of number of important novels he produced. At his funeral during the eulogy, Frederick Manfred compared him to his contemporaries, including fellow Minnesotan F. Scott Fitzgerald, who became widely considered a writer of greater import and skill. In the eulogy, Manfred acknowledges Lewis was not a natural, fluent writer. Manfred said, writing came easy to Scott Fitzgerald, and one can argue, because of it, Scott did not learn discipline. So think about that for a second. Frederick Manfred is a young man hanging out with Sinclair Lewis and is an older man hanging out with Robert Bly. I want that guy's life. So it seems like none of us compared notes before this, but The Wind Blows Free is popular. I'm going to give you a book report on The Wind Blows Free by Frederick Manfred. I went to the loft to watch Sharon Schmalar's launch her Blue Church book. I stood in the foyer talking to the bookseller. Freya Manfred passed. She was holding a book a friend returned, but she didn't want to lug it around, and it was called The Wind Blows Free, and she told me, Danny, take this book. You like my father's books. So I brought it home and read it. The book is an invisible gem. It's the story of a young man who wants adventure before settling down. Young Manfred hitchhikes his way across North Dakota. Not California, not New York, not even sexy Texas. North Dakota. This book is cool because it isn't. It's honest, which is why it's better than any Kerouac book I've ever read. You can applaud at any time. Sorry, we're in Minneapolis. Yeah, okay, you get it. How I met. You know, because to be honest with you, I mean, I like Frederick, but I love Freya. And she's my connection to the Manfred family. Years ago, when nobody knew Klecko other than the baker, no one knew the literary Klecko, I used to go to a place called the University Club, and I'd sit in the back row in the corner, as I am tonight. And a woman, Carol Connolly, discovered me, launched me, let me do a set. And I did a set, and Freya Manfred was there, and she watched me. A year later, 2 years later, I saw the greatest poetry show that I have ever seen, and I'm sure that I will ever see in my life. It was Robert Bly, Freya Manfred, Thomas R. Smith, and Jim Lemfesti. And they came, and it was the last time that Bly did the University Club, and everybody was there. And it was the All-Star game, right? And when it was over, everybody was swarming the participants, telling them how great they were. And there's Klecko in the back, in the corner. And Freya Manfred, like Moses parting the sea, keeps moving. And she walked back, and she sat next. I'm getting goosebumps. And she sat next to me and put her arm on my shoulder, and she said, "Danny, are you still writing your little poems?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "I like your poems. Keep writing." And I'll tell you, I don't know, but that might have been the single most important moment in my writing career, because that one sentence, it changed everything. Remember that. Tom Cassidy once said to me, as a writer, we don't talk to people as consumers. We talk to them as citizens. And she was speaking to me as a citizen, and it made every bit of difference. I recently went to visit her and Mr. Pope, and I'm going to read you a poem called Freya Manfred's House. Out in the middle of nowhere, there is a place that is special. Along the water, underneath a canopy of birdsong, snow melt dancing, smiles in the quiet. Out in the middle of nowhere, she invites you for conversation and praise. This is a space you never want to leave or return to. Because perfect is perfect and can never be recaptured. How can one repay such kindness, such approval? You can't. Nonetheless, it's poor form to take without giving. So word to the wise, bring an early morning dessert to go along with tea, silhouettes and sunshine, cake by the lake. Thank you. So we're hanging out, we're talking, and then I said, okay, God, Freya, you got what, this many books, your dad did that. What's the quintessential desert island? She said, Prime Fathers is it. It's everything. I said, tell me why. And she said, because these are the people who influenced my father. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. And I brought it home and I read it. Hubert Humphrey. I mean, these guys were besties. I mean, I had no idea Frederick Manfred was the first and original campaign manager for Hubert Humphrey. Not only that, but get this. Humphrey is married, and him and his wife have a baby, and that baby would grow up to be Skip. Then Manfred, all these guys are broke because they're budding politicians and writers. So now Manfred, his wife is pregnant, so they take Skip's crib for Freya. But then I pointed out to Freya over the telephone, in the book it says that you guys rotated diapers. And she said, oh, no, I don't think so. And I said, it's in the book. And she said, we don't want to remind people of that, Danny, so I'm not going to talk about it. But this book is great because it's all about his love. And Frederick Manfred is about love. And I think that's what makes him special. I talked to Marianne Grossman, Pioneer Press. I said, why was Manfred a little bit, not a lot, but why was he a little bit in the shadow of the Minnesota contemporaries? And she said, because he didn't buy into the bullshit that everyone else did. I said, you believe that? And I'm not going to name names, but she said, there's nothing wrong with plugging into the system and whoring yourself out. But Manfred didn't do it. Manfred was Manfred, and that's why she said she loved him. Also, a lot of stuff about Sinclair Lewis, but even most importantly, probably the part you might like the best, are parts about his father. I'm going to close with, and it's just something you can't understand unless you're a big man. I'm a big man. We have a club. It's called the Big Man's Club. And in this, we all sit there and we look at each other and we're like, I bet I could kick your ass. And you're like, I don't think so. But we're not going to do it because we got to stick together, right? Here's my poem called I Want to Fight Frederick Manfred. 1. Fred, you're dead. I'm not. But I wish, I really do wish I could find a time machine that would transport us to a place where each of us would be in our prime, utilizing tactics in full measure of our strength, battling on sod, in wind, in blood. And if that can't be arranged, I'd settle for asphalt. 2. Fred, you're dead. I'm not. But together, we would stand 13 feet tall, weigh well over a quarter ton, scrapping across prairies and parking lots. I have it on account. Vegas has you as the 3-1 favorite. But if there was an intangible, it might be you're Nordic and noble, whereas I come from a brood of vipers. Either way, it's safe to say the winner should get a shot at Thomas Wolfe. 3, and the final. Fred, you're dead. I'm not. What I wouldn't give to be your little brother. Discussing cloud formations and highways until we get bored enough to snatch Bly's bongos while pulling his poncho over his head. I'd give him 99ers, you'd give him a Snuggie, and in the end, all would be grand once we came to the realization nothing bonds like brothers in blood. My name's Klecko. Thank you. Good night.
Boy, I can't follow that. No. Danny's one of a kind. A real voice of St. Paul. That's my hometown, too. I want to thank Ted. Ted, where are you? Ted, Tributary has been such a fantastic service for those of us that have been coming for a few years. And in many ways, you're one of those big spoons stirring things up. Many things to many people. Now, I so appreciate that you gave us this opportunity, because this is just a continuation of what writing does for a people and for a land. And you've continued that, and I'm so grateful. And I'm thank you for coming. Buy books. It's really important. Thanks.
Tim Young. Tim Young put this together as his brainchild. I'm thrilled to be part of it. I appreciate it. Tim mentioned this very briefly, but I wanted to point out Mike Hazard. Mike, what's the name of your film that you made? American Grizzly, a 30-minute film by Mike Hazard. You can look it up. It is great. It's inspirational. It's what it showed me was Fred Manfred not only walked the walk, he crawled the crawl. He's a badass dude, man. Thanks all for coming. Appreciate it. Love you all.